This is Whole Life, and it is a special post-Easter edition. I mean, it's not an Easter edition because that would have been Sunday, and it's not Sunday, it's Tuesday. But you don't know that because, well, you're not here, and we are. But it is a post-Easter edition. And Easter, is it... Someone asked me if you had the chance to go to one service, like the big worship services every year are Christmas and Easter, right? Like in Christianity,
right?
Like the big ones. So which one, if you had to give up one of them, which one would it be and why? It was just a really weird question at the time, but then I really was like, you know what? I mean, you can't.
That's like, which one of your children do you love the most?
I feel like.
But you can't have Easter if you don't have Christmas.
I mean, that's
right?
true.
So you got to have Christmas. Doesn't that, I mean...
But Christmas doesn't mean anything if Easter doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, this is almost like...
it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the Easter egg?
It was a question. It was a question that totally caught me off guard. And yet I was like, well, that's kind of interesting just because, it's the services that nobody wants to miss, right? Like we were packed. And even by first service standards, we were packed this week.
Right.
And second service, I mean, we had to start heading people off at the pass at the moment they entered. Like, please don't go into the worship center. There's people standing on the sides.
That's the worst thing ever to say.
I hate
is
that.
terrible.
I hated doing it. But I also, when you see someone walk in and they see all the people on the side waiting, looking for a place, and it's like, seriously, there really are no more chairs available, but we do have a place for you to worship. And there's other people there that you can worship with. And so I did feel good that at least in 105 where we had extra places to sit and enjoy the worship, there was enough people there at least to make it feel like you were still worshiping with family, even though it wasn't in the worship center. But I guess it's a good problem to have, but also you just want everyone to have the total worship experience, because that was a wonderful worship experience. So many good, like the chat this week mainly, we only have a couple comments. The chat was just literally full of people who were saying how much they could feel the worship, even though they were at home, that they could feel the Holy Spirit, and that they could tell that everything that went into the worship service had been carefully planned and executed, and so many kudos to everyone that participated, because it's a big project. It is a
big project. When most people are ticking down their Christmas lights, we're planning for Easter. So that's kind of how that timeline works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was bittersweet in a little bit, because this week on Sabbath we said shalom, bye-bye to Max. All too short.
Maybe we should, clarify what that means.
Max has decided that he is going to pursue his MBA.
Yeah.
Nice.
And he has his sights set, I believe it's called a G93. And that allows you to, or prepares you, or gives you entrance into opportunities with things like a ATF, FBI, IRS.
Okay.
All kinds of cool things, but you got to have an MBA first.
Yeah.
And I think what really hooked him. Max is a smart guy. He was like, "Wait a minute, I could be retired in about 23 years after I finish. Like in 20 years after I finish my MBA, I could be retired with like a full pension." Like things that don't exist anymore outside of government, like pensions.
Well, this is my last week here before I go get my MBA.
Wow, you put in you put in a lot of effort to that PhD for nothing.
Oh my goodness!
I guess.
Oh man, no, but it was bittersweet. It was short, but also, when you find what you're supposed to do. When you're when you're young, you don't really know. You like, hey, I tested this, and then you find and you find it, and so. He has been walking on air the past week, and I was so happy to see that Saturday morning I got here, and he gave me a huge high five, and was just like, you could tell, like he was all over the chat. He was good vibes everywhere.
That's
and
awesome.
So
plus Max has permanently changed the face of Whole Life staff, because we used to do brag time during staff meeting. Now we do flex time. So there you go. That's the lasting effect that Max had for us.
A legacy in just a short period of time. I mean, that's big. That's huge. So anyway, Max, if you're listening, we will miss you, but also wish you extremely well. And do you know how many people have talked to me, Cecilia, I know you're listening, that loved the education from last week's podcast about Lent and about Ash Wednesday and all of that. And so, how cool is it that people from how diverse we are at Whole Life, that we can all learn together, we can figure things out together and just do life together. And I thought the outpouring, even in the chat, I think it was Tammy that said, man, I really loved it on the podcast last week to get someone's, firsthand perspective. And so super cool. And then we do have, it is the resurgence of Carolina Dave.
Oh
no, he came back, huh?
Welcome back,
Well, I think he's been
Dave.
Here. Yeah. So he sent us an email that said, the Easter service was awesome. The praise team, the choir, and the band, oh goodness. I hope that's what music sounds like in heaven. They all did an incredible job. I was especially moved by Ken's reference to his late cousin, Jeanette. I had the privilege of calling her a friend, and her death was a horrible occurrence. I do not know why she had to leave us so soon. 39 is way too young. So I guess I'd like to focus on the fact that while she was still with us, she inspired me to be a better person. Looking back on things nearly a decade later, I think she made me want to be a better Christian as well, just by how she treated others, though I didn't realize it at the time. She's greatly missed, but I look forward to seeing her in the morning. As always, you and the rest of the crew at Whole Life remain in my prayers. Keep on doing God's work. It is greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Dave.
That's awesome, Carolina Dave.
How about that? I always love to get emails, and when I saw it was from Carolina Dave, I was like, all right, this is going to be a good week. It's going to be a good week. We say this a lot, but really, if you didn't tune in for Easter service, did you
go do it?
Did you have Easter? I mean, you might have had something else. I don't know. Maybe you went somewhere. I don't know. Maybe you had other cool things to do too. But man, that was, I don't know. It might be my favorite. I really liked Easter last year, but I feel like this year, what did we just talk about before we came on? Melanie, you said it was, how did you describe it?
That was a long time ago, Randy. That was at least 10 minutes ago.
At least 10 minutes ago. But you said what I was trying to explain really, really well, and you'll probably do a better job now of like how we approach the weekend and the actual service. Not so much as maybe like we normally would, but more storytelling.
Oh, right. Yeah. That was the point. We were trying to tell a story. So it was obviously different than our typical worship services. And yeah, I think we started out a little dark because I think it's important to experience the darkness so that you can really experience the impact of the resurrection and the light. So
did you? Well, you probably did. Tenebrae?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was not feeling good the week in the run up to Easter, and I was like, "That's it. I'm going to miss it again."
Yeah, you missed
Ken,
it. Randy.
Did you make it?
I was there last year, but this year I was driving back from a speaking engagement up in Tennessee, so I unfortunately was not able to be there. But I really wished I had been.
You don't have any frequent flyer miles in your car, do you? Because that's
so far I haven't gotten any tickets knock on wood. So anyway, but yeah, that was that trip. It turned out to be a good trip though, Matt, in the sense that now that we have Max's position to fill, I was able to check in with some of the journalism and communication students up at Southern Adventist University, and I think we got a couple leads there maybe, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I had the opportunity to go up and speak for the induction of students into the National Communication Society. So they take their students that have a certain GPA, and then they have to have done some other things, and they get inducted into this society, which I don't think my GPA was high enough to get inducted to when I was in that program. But it was a real honor to be asked to come back and speak to the School of Journalism and Communication, which is the one I graduated from.
You graduated at Southern?
Yep, 25 years ago. So it was pretty cool thing. And
why did I think different?
My daughter also happened to be being inducted in at that time, so that was also a added bonus to be there for that.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. Congrats, Kyla.
Yeah, congrats, Kyla, a member of the Whole Life team as well.
So every time it's like, so did I embarrass you?
You showed up, didn't you?
Yeah.
No, Dad.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, one of the first things, I mean, of course, you know, the idea of the storytelling and the, you know, everything looked different this week than a normal week at Whole Life. There was the big LED screen up on front and the sides, and there were, you know, more lights than normal, and there were more people on stage than normal. I mean, I don't know if you can get many more people between the strings and the choir and the band and the singers. It was pretty full. But I was really happy we had the screen and its size for the Eden video. I don't know what else to call it.
Right.
I call it the Slitherer.
The Slitherer.
That, I mean, besides the fact that snakes just absolutely creep me out, like worse than anything else.
I'm usually with you. That snake, for whatever reason, did not creep me out.
No, it was.
Well, you know what? Here's why. Because she was so sweet. She was the sweetest thing.
I have never been able to say that about a snake before, but I can almost go there with you.
Well, she arrived, by the way, for those who don't know, Eden was filmed in my backyard. so they showed up with the snake, and the snake, she was all cuddled up the owner of the snake has two little boys, and the snake was all curled up, wrapped up in one of the little boys' arms. And she was so cute because we kept putting her in the tree, and she wanted to be on the grass so bad that she kept trying to wind her way down, and we put her back in the tree and she'd wind down. So the very end of the video, where she actually crawls all the way across the screen, like, she's too cute because she's so excited to finally be in the grass. That's why she like lifts up her little head and her little tongue is going because she's so excited to be in the grass. So I'm like, that's not creepy.
Melanie
that's
is
cute.
making like cradle with her arms,
cradle.
Like cradling the snake, and she's saying
her name was
Neela.
Neela.
The name,
you can't be freaked out if the snake has a name.
She's smiling like this is like one of her children. Like, oh, it's Neela. And she's like doing this, and I'm just over here going. Now, I wasn't as creeped out as I thought I would be, but seeing the video in that format really was. Because I watched it prior to, obviously the actual program. But actually seeing it on that screen, it was pretty powerful, way more than I thought it would. After some music and, you know, as you came to the part. So kudos for the planning of how this all came together, because I really felt like, because a lot of times you're like, well, it's another video. And maybe it's because you don't have as much invested as we did, obviously, in this, where, you know, Stanley helped put it together and you guys had this idea, and then you find someone with the snake and someone with long hair to mimic Eve and eat the fruit, but it really made it feel almost like you were there in a way. And then handing the fruit off to you see the man's hands. You don't get to see Adam, but you see the man's hands.
Those are actually my dad's hands.
Yes, I thought so. Okay. Rod, good job on the hand modeling. We might offer you another contract later. But seriously, that was watching that video and kind of just letting that settle. And then when Ken came to his story about Jeanette and then an enemy has done this, man, that was really powerful in the way that brought everything together. And then I'm waiting for Ken to just simply not be able to speak anymore. I don't know how you do these stories of personal loss and pain in a message and then expect that you're better at that than me to hold it together. Because clearly someone that young, and, you know, when you turned around and looked at those pictures and, you know, you kind of remembering that, and I'm like, man, give Ken credit for being able to share things that I don't think everyone gets to share, because I'd be a mess if that was my cousin that I was talking about. So kudos to however it is that you do that, or is it you just buck up and I don't know. How do you do it?
Oh, I think anybody who's attended church here long enough knows that I don't always make it.
Well, but continuing on to me is making it that.
Well,
to speak of her,
and that's where I appreciate Melanie. We practice this, and so it once you say a couple times out loud, and just kind of, I know that Melanie had to work pretty hard to make it through the sermon that she did, talking about the loss of her son, and it's just one of those things that you learn how to get the tears out maybe a little bit of a different time, or
work through the emotions kind of in advance.
Well, people were talking about that afterwards, and even in the chat, just about how at Whole Life, no matter who's up front, there's always a very discernible air of authenticity. Like, we're sharing something not because we just want to tell you a story that's sad in my life, but because it means something and it has a connection. And
I think the thing about that whole story that the whole thing about that story, and I appreciated how you kind of framed it a little bit earlier, was not so much my cousin passing away as my cousin Jeremy kind of processing through it with us at a memorial service where he's through a lot of emotion saying an enemy has done this, and putting the blame where it belongs. And for me, that was a very powerful moment. That, like I said, it's been almost 10 years, and every time I can just visualize Jeremy saying it. I can visualize those moments, and I can't help but think, I was thinking, well, if it was my brother that was there, how would I be speaking about this? And so, you want to talk about somebody who's courageous. It was my cousin Jeremy. I think he even sang at that memorial service for his sister. And but there's also that just hope that Jeremy has in something else. And so for me, that's what I wanted us to really think about, is that, like Melanie said, we kind of started off dark, and the sermon certainly started off dark, but it goes to, without Christ, there is really pretty much darkness. There is, there isn't a whole lot of hope out there if this is it, at least from my perspective. And to be able to say, hey, there is an enemy that's doing things. There's a reason that this happens. For many of us, is a way of understanding and making sense of life and the things that happen to us. And so I really appreciated my cousin's vulnerability at that point, and to be able to share that with others, and hope that some of the loss that they've experienced maybe helps another person find peace and purpose. That would be I know meaningful to my uncle, aunt, and cousin.
I mean, I really resonated with the fact that, afterwards, is it, the doubting, the questioning of God, that, that it's okay, and that the Trinity created everything like in absolute perfection. And even in that world, it wasn't impervious to sin and to the worst possible character that has played out ever. And at first I was like, well, does that kind of mean that, well, if God couldn't prevent sin from entering his perfect world, how am I supposed to compete with that? I guess, maybe that's just the way it is. And maybe we focus too much on the things that we think we can control or can't control. And, well, sin is just sin, and God couldn't prevent it, or did God allow it?
Well, let's talk about that. Do you think that God could have prevented sin?
Well, I suppose he could have. I mean, God can do anything if he wanted, but that takes away free will, right?
I mean, that's definitely you're going along my theological.
Okay. I mean, that's
lane of things, but yeah, I mean.
But I feel like sometimes that you can take that and then just say, well, why am I working so hard? I mean, at this, to try to be better or to whatever, I'm just going to sin anyway, because it's not really preventable if I have free will.
Yeah, and what I would probably say back to you is the reason that I think the problem with sin is that it generally hurts you or hurts somebody else. And that's generally the problem.
Okay, you're smiling.
No, I'm just smiling because we've got all these cans of theological worms that we've just opened up right here.
Just gliding past very quickly.
Yes. No, well, that's what I was counting on you, was to check the lids and see if anything was outdated.
Oh, man.
Anything that, maybe we should take a second.
They're actually out of the can. They're crawling all over the room.
I feared if I opened a few cans, Melanie might wade in eventually.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
The first one didn't work. I was like, okay, well, let's keep moving.
Let's try another one.
Let's poke a little harder.
No, we're just going to let the cans lay.
I mean, we can open up the cans, but this might be a really long podcast.
Well, even all the cans aside, no matter kind of how you look at that, at the end though, when I like how you said that they hid in the garden from God, but he never stopped looking for them and found them, and he never stops looking for us. So regardless of that part never gets old to stop and think about. When, I don't know, that's my favorite part of the story in the garden is when, it's short-lived because, they get expelled from the garden not shortly thereafter, it seems like. I don't know if there's a chronological actual timeline, but it seems like it would have been rather expeditious after the fall. But when God's asking them questions, it seems very sincere, very like, hey guys, what's up? Where are you at? Like, we're having, it's time, 4:30, it's time for sweet tea. And I'm sitting on the porch and you guys didn't show up today. What's up? Like,
That's so interesting, Randy, because the voice actor that we had read the script, he had to read it like 5 different times, or maybe more, 5 or 10 different times, because each time was a slightly different tonality. What have you done? What have you done? Like, what have you done? Like, there's so many different ways that you can say that. And so him sort of working through all those different tonalities and us like, what about this way? What about this way? What about this way?
So in those cans, how do you decide which one of those is at least most accurate for the overall feel you're looking for?
Randy, I don't know which one is the most accurate. I just chose the one that I most wanted to hear.
Okay. All right. No,
let's be honest.
Yeah, no, but it doesn't diminish the fact that we all have our ideas of what that situation was.
Right.
And I think there's some beauty in the fact that there's room to be able to do that and to say, man, for me, I think God was like, what did you do? But I really think it was like, yo, guys, hey, like we were going to sit down.
What did you do?
It was afternoon. Like, you guys didn't show up. I'm looking all over for you. What's going on? Like, I really feel like that was how, for me, that was God looking in the garden, just totally being like.
And this is the part where it's difficult not to read, to Melanie's point there, it's a little bit difficult at times not to read into the Bible your perspective of God.
Yeah.
Because the tone that you hear out of that phrase
it says a lot.
Is totally the tone that you're constructing, because the Bible doesn't tell us what the tone was. And there's those who really like to hear that, what have you done? And then there's those of us who really like to hear that, oh, what have you done? Almost nobody's like, what have you done? Nobody's like that, but, or not nobody I know of, but anyway, but the thing is, we all kind of have this voice in our head that we hear coming from God in that context. And it comes down to how we view God and what we think God is like based on the rest of the Bible, or what we think God is like based on what we've been told about God, or the church that we grew up told us that God was like. Sure. So we can bring a lot of baggage into that we're not even really aware of.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a neutral reading. I think we all read everything through our own psychological noise.
Which parts, though, seem like this part? I don't think it matters necessarily, unless maybe you're someone that's just totally negative about God. You read the Old Testament and you just you feel and see the God of hellfire and brimstone, and just demanding and knocking people dead for touching the ark, and the things that seem so arbitrary sometimes to us, or the other. But so maybe it doesn't matter necessarily. But then when Ken, you said Christ was willing to give up eternity so you could choose whether or not you wanted to accept the gift. I don't know how else you read that other than when you read the account of what happens to him and the fact that he's conflicted, even though, he is God, he's Jesus, he's part of the Trinity. But there's, to me, then you read that and you almost have to feel like God is broken inside in going, I can't believe I had to do this, even though I knew I was going to have to do this. That whole, God's always been here, he's always going to be here. But I feel like then I have to read that part with, hey guys, yeah, I missed you this afternoon. And then at the end, I don't know that it really says much about, other than he did give him kind of the doom and gloom of what life was going to be like afterwards. But I almost feel like that what we don't know is like God walking them to the edge of the garden and hugging them for a really, really long time before that happens. Also being sad knowing what's going to happen because of what happened.
And then putting an angel with a flaming sword at the entrance.
Yeah, well, was that just for them? I mean, I don't know that much about, to me, that part is a mystery because I've heard 1,000 different ideas about, is the garden a place on earth? Is it a place that, is then gone away? It's in heaven. I mean, there's a lot of different theories about it. And I don't know if I don't even know what I believe about that. I'll just put that out there. I don't know. So was that just, the flaming thing? Is that just for everybody or just them? Well,
and it could be metaphor. It could be a lot of things.
Sure.
So
I don't know. I just really feel like when I read, when you said that, Christ was willing to give up eternity so you could choose whether or not you wanted to accept the gift of eternity. That just made me feel like that the ending to that part of history in the garden was just a really sad, but also sending them off like, I still love you, and to me, I just picture a little group hug that just lasts for a long time.
But Randy, you what you said just kind of brings up a conundrum. I'll toss it to Ken. Ken,
all right.
How does an eternal God give up eternity?
Dum, 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 dum.
Well, an eternal God becomes human and takes on human flesh. And it is a great mystery.
Good answer.
But it's an interesting thing, right? I mean, if Christ had died permanently, what would have happened to this Holy Spirit and to the Father? So, I think what becomes interesting to me is just the hearing Christ's anguish on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And having felt forsaken before, but not being on a cross, dying, what that must have felt like for an eternal God to feel something so human, to feel something so spectacularly human, right? To that feeling of abandonment, that feeling of not existing, at least not being visible, not being seen, not having worth. To me, that's, in theological sermons, we'll argue all day long about what Christ knew and what he didn't know.
Right.
Outside of being a good Adventist, I really genuinely do agree with the position that one of our founders, Ellen White, took on this, that she says that Christ couldn't see beyond the tomb, and that basically that when he died, it felt like for him, like this was it. And to me, that I don't think that you can unequivocally prove that through biblical text. I think you can use some biblical texts like where, my God, why have you forsaken me? The fact that the Bible tells us that Christ endured hell on our behalf, I think you can use some of those things to make your case for it. But there's something to me that is just, if God is what Paul claims, if he is perfect love, or in 1 John claims that God is love, but Paul defines what love is in 1 Corinthians 13. And if that is who God really is, for me, the ultimate proof would be in a God that was willing to give up existence for us to have the opportunity to do that. That is the ultimate, to me, act of love for somebody. Because, I believe in eternity. And so I think if I died for one of the two of you or for my own kids, I think I would have but I'll have another go. I'll be resurrected someday. But I think, I'm just going to give up my existence so that you guys can choose whether you're going to live a good life or not. I think about that scene at the very end of Saving Private Ryan, where the guy, Private Ryan, I'm sorry, I'm giving you the spoiler alert if you haven't
watched it by now, too bad.
If you haven't watched it, you're planning on watching it, which I'm not suggesting you should. But anyway, at the end, he basically is, in the graveyard by the grave of a guy that gave his life for him. And before this guy had died, he said, "Make it count," or something along those lines. And this, character says, I hope I lived a life that was worthy of what you gave up for me. And I've always found that just such a poignant scene, because it's like, if somebody gives their life for you, gives up their existence so that you can continue on, I totally resonate with the character saying, better make it count.
Better make it count, yeah.
Because this means I don't get to see Kyla and Eric. This means that I don't get to watch, if Kyla winds up deciding she wants to get married, or Eric, I don't get to watch that. I don't get to be a part of that. If they have grandchildren, I don't get to be a part of that. I don't, and I'm choosing to give myself for you. And that's, I think, to me, what's so powerful about the picture of a God that loves me so much, as messed up as I am, that God doesn't die so that I will be saved, but so that I can choose. He dies so that I have a choice. And that is my theological construct. I know other people have different constructs on this. But to me, that is the powerful thing, that Christ would die so that I could just choose whether I want to make something of this sacrifice or not. And that, to me, is the power of the gospel for me.
Well, Romans 5:10, when you this is very close to the end of the message, said, "For since we were reconnected by the death of God's Son, while we were still his enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of his Son." And you mentioned that Paul said, we don't mourn as those without hope. Mm-hmm. And as when you're coming to the end of it, and communion was just a really intricate part of the way the service flowed, and having Allie sing on stage in between those parts were just, really felt like, sometimes you think back to Bible times, and when they talk about the way David, worshiped God and just was felt like he was in his presence. When you read some of the Psalms, it really felt that way for me this past week. And that was just everything flowing together. I feel like sometimes when everything happens and, you're really trying to ask God, I'm open to do whatever you want me to do to make, to bring people to you and to see Easter for all it is, other than, there's more to it than just the resurrection, even though that's obviously a huge, huge part of, and the reason for Easter. But it's all these little pieces that when you start putting them together, that just puts perspective to things that you don't think about I don't think about every single day, even though they're all connected. It's not something I sit and think that deeply about, but I just felt like that the communion being part of it was in the Last Supper. And then it was really cool. Emily, well, this was obviously her. If you watch Second Service, which is what was posted on the internet, you'll see plenty of her. And this was her favorite service in a long time. And Saturday night, she was it was time to go to bed, and Heather and Ellie were here. Ellie danced for another performance on a Sunday service at Advent Health Orlando, and so they were gone. It was just her and I at home, and she's like, I was like, hey, it's time to go to bed, and she's like, I don't want to go to bed. Mom and sis aren't here, and I miss Mom. And I'm like, well, you're stuck with Dad. I'm sorry. So I'm like, let's go read stories, and so, she crawled into bed with her, and we got ourselves all situated, and I'm like, what story do you want to read? And she's like, Easter. So she has an Easter book that she absolutely loves, and we probably read that multiple times a month anyway. And she started putting together, not that she doesn't know the story, but today she's like, well, that was the bread and the juice that we did when they came to the part about the Last Supper. And then she was like, and then Jesus died for me. And she's like, I can't wait to get to heaven. And so just like watching her do the mental rundown of everything after worshiping, just like with just abandon, like just really worshiping. And I thought, man, sometimes just being that innocent as she is and enjoying it. And so to live that through with her was a super blessing. And I just hope that anyone that watches or attended this past week kind of felt that same piece of just putting things together and just remembering and celebrating, what all of what we just talked about, all the sacrifice meant. And I like to quote, as Anonymous was in the chat and said, Easter is a time when God turned the inevitability of death into the invincibility of life. They said, I love this quote by Craig D. Lunsborough. And they just said, thank you so much, Pastor Ken and the team, for a most uplifting and inspiring Easter service that has brought us all closer to our King. So I agree. I think that was just an amazing Easter. And even though it's not Easter, you can still go back and check it out. It was the storytelling, the kind of the journey that Melanie and team took us through, and Ken with the message, really was impactful. This is, I don't know, it's weird. As Adventists, we don't always get excited about Easter as much as I feel like we should. Like, it's like, well, that's tomorrow. And,
Yes.
we don't worship on Sunday.
Well, you don't?
Well, you're supposed to, but, corporately speaking. So, 24/7 is what I've heard.
Probably worship whenever we want to, I think.
I think
I don't think we're restricted.
No, it's encouraged. I've read somewhere. I think it was the Bible.
You only get to rest, though, on one day.
I don't know.
You don't rest on Sunday,
Never.
Did you feel rested on Saturday? Were you resting?
I was not resting.
No. But anyway, that please don't miss the message and the entire program. It was just a really great.
Yeah. So I do want to make a mea culpa on this one, though.
Go for it.
Yeah. This is where I need to own some bad theology that I threw out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Is that what the wink is? What's going on here?
Melanie came up to me after the service and said, so I see you've rethought your stance on the Trinitarianism after second service. And I
went a little rogue on your Trinitarian theology there, Ken.
Yep. And so I feel like I need to go ahead and own that I did not say what I should have said. I know what I meant. And if anybody knows me, they know I am a pretty rabid Trinitarian, but you wouldn't know that necessarily by the comment that I made, which was, I think I said something along the lines of that Jesus had to decide whether he would be his own God or whether he would follow the Father, something along those lines. Did I get that pretty close to right, Melanie?
Pretty close.
Yeah. So let me just be clear. Jesus is all God. Okay. What I was trying to say, although apparently I went off a little rogue on the script there. What I was trying to say was that Jesus had to decide whether he wanted to follow the will of the Father.
Oh.
Or whether he wanted to do what he wanted to do, as we hear him in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, I got, take this cup away from me, but not my will, but yours be done. And again, going back to that original sin, going back to, I'm using original sin improperly, but going back to Adam and Eve's sin.
He keeps going.
I know.
I thought you were going to the weeds.
To the weeds?
Yeah, because that was...
you like that one too?
That was a fun one.
I think he said went to the weed, didn't he?
I think he said to the weed, and then he said, I think I should be careful how I say that.
Say that.
There's all kinds of good stuff.
Although that was a good... I think that was a slip of the tongue, that was the Holy Spirit led.
I think it was perfect, actually. A little comic relief.
It brought a little levity to that, and so I think that was okay, but I hate it when that happens, so I'm with you.
So anyway, just want to be clear.
But
Jesus, God.
You had quite a day.
Totally
Ken is still employed.
Yeah. Not as worried about employment as I am about being clear on something that I care about.
Hey, we won't even go to introductions before service, will we? We don't want to talk.
Oh, don't you do it.
I won't do it. I won't do it.
Nope, that one.
Nope, not doing it. See, we are all just human people. Even Ken is human.
Especially
Ken.
Even Ken. Well, speaking of humanity, do you know what would be a crime against humanity?
I don't know.
Is if you didn't know that upcoming is church retreat.
Oh, right? That would be
that's
bad.
in 2 weeks, yeah.
It's in 2 weeks. So we have this
Actually,
Saturday.
Slightly less than 2 weeks.
Slightly less.
As
and
some of us in this room
feel
are
the
acutely
clock
aware
ticking.
of.
Oh, yeah. And especially those of us who last week, I don't know who got me sick because I'm still looking to repay somehow.
I blame John.
Well, that's what I've heard, but I don't know if that's true or not. But you
could blame Max. He's gone.
That's it, right? He's not here to defend himself.
Sorry, Max.
Yeah, sorry, bud. We're still gonna do the biscuits and gravy. Don't worry. That's still on the table. And then Aubrey was gone, and I'm just like, man, we're dropping like flies.
They were locked down for that.
So many people were sick.
And then Easter, when I got here, it's like, man, I'm feeling pretty good today. And I was in the chat. We had a little hiccup with streaming in first, and a little stressful. And then when it got around a second, I was helping pass out the make sure people were, when on their way in, were getting the emblems and helping people find a place to sit. And all of a sudden, I felt the heat on that side of the room where we had the door. We had to have the door open a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I'm getting hot. And then I was like, I think I'm going to sit down for a minute. And I sat down. I was like, wow, this feels really good to sit down. And then, upcoming church retreat. So there's really no time to sit down. It's time to stand up, run, walk, do whatever you can.
It is going to be so good, though.
It is going to be amazing.
It is. We're doing, John Rivers, great Christian businessman here in the Orlando area. I heard that Four Rivers Barbecue was just voted the #1 casual restaurant in Florida.
Wow.
By a national organization that I think it was in Florida, and I'm not sure I don't think it was nationwide, but I think it was in Florida, the #1 casual.
Man.
I believe it.
I
just had some vegan burnt ends the other day.
Did you?
Yeah.
Delicious.
Very good.
And then, so he's going to be our guest speaker. Just great guy. He's done a hilarious video with Stanley that
it's gonna
you
be
do not want to miss
fantastic.
that. It is so good. We introduced him to some vegetarian products, and I'll just leave it there. And then, and so he's going to be our guest speaker. That's going to be great. And then we're having Four Rivers Barbecue catered in on Friday night. So it's
tough to beat.
It's going to be good.
Even if it's the vegetarian burnt ends?
Vegan burnt ends.
Vegan. I've heard good things about them. I mean,
really
I'm not vegan, but I've heard they're
delicious.
You should try them.
They're really good.
I should.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good. Yeah. And then
I'm going to go with you next time, and I'll just sneak.
All right.
And then Sunday, the water park's open.
That's
Yeah.
it.
So that'll be Sunday morning.
And don't forget Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, don't forget that.
You are going to see Ken in a whole new way.
You may never be able to get it.
I'm a little worried about that, to be honest with you. But,
Well, speaking of employment.
This will prove to you that I'm not that concerned about the employment side of things.
Well, if there's nothing else, at Whole Life, we love to have fun, and we love to not take ourselves too seriously.
That's
and
right.
this will definitely help in that endeavor for sure. So, hey, that is everything for this week. Thank you to everyone who sent something in. Carolina Dave, here's looking at you, and here's hoping that next year is your year at church retreat.
Church retreat?
Yeah, because whether it's skydiving, if we have to do skydiving to get you there, I'll have to talk to John
about. I thought that's
about.
what would keep him away from. No.
Well, I don't know if he got to push somebody out first.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. Yeah.
He might follow. I don't know. No.
I mean, if he got to push me out, he would probably be okay with that, but he's not going to follow me out of the plane.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. We may be underestimating Carolina Dave. Right?
yeah. I don't know.
Known him for quite a while.
You've
I'm
known him,
not
so
saying,
I mean,
I'm not saying I couldn't be, but Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you're coming out of the plane. Am I wrong?
I mean, I love me some Carolina Dave because from what I know, but I don't know that if he's got that in him. But send us an email. Let us know how it's going to go for next year. But anyway, that's going to do it for this week. So happy post-Easter to everyone. Check out the message and the program from last week if you haven't already. And just, you know what? Thank you. I've seen a ton of people send me in the last 2 weeks that they have been catching up on podcasts. So I've watched the numbers start to pile up and I'm like, man, what is everyone... Are we either finding new people? No, it wasn't finding new people. It was people were behind and they're catching up. So thank you for that. Don't forget to share the podcast. And you know what? Just have an amazing rest of your week. And wait a minute. What are we doing next week? I mean, we mentioned Church Street. What's happening this week?
Oh, this coming week.
Oh, this is a good one. This is Youth Sabbath.
That's
we have,
right. I knew there was something else.
Phenomenal young people who are going to be speaking. It's
speaking.
Great.
That's right. Speaking.
Yep.
And music and pretty much every other facet.
So are we doing podcast on Saturday and talk to those youngsters?
Well,
that's, I think that's you're going to have to
reach out,
find out. Yeah.
Okay. Reach out, find out. Tune in next week and find out if I was successful or not.
I asked them about it.
Yeah? What'd they say?
I didn't get a final answer.
All right. Forward me their information. I'll see what I can do. I'll
make sure they know Randy's really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they know Randy.
Well, hopefully. And we can, maybe we can make snacks or something.
There we go.
Because I know you got to feed the young.
I might show up for that.
Me too.
Oh, yeah. Snacks.
Okay, this week we saved food for the 49th minute of the podcast.
Nice.
That's got to be some kind of record.
Yep.
But it worked out.
It worked out fine. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Join us next week. Obviously, you don't want to miss that and the follow-up podcast because I am just going to say it here. I think they're going to be here. So enjoy the rest of your week.